If we were doing a baseball show, we'd have to talk about that for 4 hours. Or we talk about Freddie Galvis signing on in Japan.
Yeah, man. Hats off to like all those morning shows for the sports that stay on like off season. They got to bring on like guests and
I used to do
get the hot stove, stretch it out to an hour and a half. Yeah, bless them.
I used to do 3 hours. A lot of Mets. What up? This is the Yahoo NFL live show here on the Awesemo DFS channel. Pete McCarthy, Matt Savoca getting you all fired up for this Monday night game. Actually, a good one tonight. We've got the Rams. We've got the Cardinals. The Rams 8-4, been struggling against some good teams of late as they incorporate the likes of Von Miller and Odell Beckham Jr. The Cardinals, it almost doesn't matter, right? They put Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins on the bench, let them nurse some injuries for some extra weeks. And Colt McCoy's winning games for them. Cardinals 10-2 overall this season. It's a fun matchup, and it's a lot of fun to break down from a fantasy perspective because you start looking at this, and it's like, well, who am I leaving on the bench? Somebody good is going to be down there with all of the receiving targets, especially, that will be a factor in this game. I'm loving it, man. How are we feeling?
I'm feeling great. Yeah, really excited for this matchup. These two teams have already met. Arizona won handily 37-20, and it wasn't really that close before that. They tacked on a touchdown at the end, Los Angeles did. So, yeah, you said it right off the bat. They have struggled the Los Angeles Rams have against good teams. And maybe if it's a playoff environment, you'd say, okay, maybe straight up they might lose to Tennessee if they have all their weapons. Okay, straight up they might lose to a team like Green Bay, but they are getting beat soundly by playoff caliber teams right now and only mowing over teams like the Jaguars. So while it was good to see them take care of business last week, I don't think the Rams are going to be in for the same kind of game at all tonight.
No, I don't think beating the Jaguars means you're all hunky dory and ready to go. So we've seen those pick sixes from Matthew Stafford over the course of this year. They're trying to put all that to bed. The basics for tonight: the Cardinals are a 2.5-point favorite on their home field. So Vegas looks at these two teams as fairly evenly matched. Maybe a slight edge to the Cards there. Over under 51 points. So we're expecting some numbers to be put up. And best of all, no weather to worry about, unlike last Monday night, which wasn't all that fun.
No, it wasn't. And there are moments in the NFL where weather trumps talent, and that was it. This should not be one of it. Although, didn't we have a lightning delay in? I guess we're in Arizona. We're in the Arizona Dome, so we're really good. Arizona,
we're very safe.
Please don't let us down.
As long as the lights stay on, it'll be okay
Right.
in Arizona. Give us a like, subscribe, keep up with all of our shows here at the Awesemo DFS channel. We've got DFS offers, giveaways. And once you do subscribe, hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows do go live. And be sure to check out today's free premium tools and data, which are Monday Night Football player rankings, NBA player rankings, and some NHL player rankings. That game was canceled, so you probably don't need them a whole lot. Pete McCarthy, Matt Savoca, get involved in the chat room. We'll answer some of your questions. We'll go position group by position group through this game. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but what do we make of these Rams? Do you just say, hey, they can't beat anybody good, I'm throwing them out the window? I still look at this Rams team, see a lot of talent. They've beaten some good teams earlier in the season, and they're trying to get their footing once again here. I don't rule out the Rams walking into Arizona, divisional game, coming away with a victory here. Actually, I took the Rams getting the 2.5 points. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, and it's certainly possible, right? Divisional games, these two teams know each other with the exception of the new additions on both sides. So we can always say that the volatility of the outcomes here is a little bit higher than the typical NFL game where the volatility is already extremely high. With the Los Angeles Rams, I think you do have to say that if you're building multiple lineups, you should certainly be building lineups that include them figuring it out against good teams. But we can also say they haven't really figured it out since they lost star receiver Robert Woods for the year. So really, the only relevant stats are from week 10 forward, in my opinion. So obviously, you got players like Cooper Kupp, who, regardless of matchup, are going to stand out. But I think the Los Angeles offense really has a lot to prove at this point in the season. There was also a study done, I believe it was PFF, that was showing that teams over the course of Sean McVay's coaching career have figured him out the second half of the season in terms of advanced metrics like EPA has been way worse for Sean McVay coach teams than the first 8 games of the year. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, that is interesting, and that is certainly what we have seen play out over the course of this year. You love to say, "Hey, I blame Jared Goff," but now it's Matthew Stafford in that situation there. So let's get into the Rams offense first, because this is where we're kind of going that direction. Cooper Kupp is on the injury report, a toe injury, but a full participant. He's going to play. Darrell Henderson, running back, placed on the COVID list on Saturday. He will not play. So when we get into the running backs, we'll touch more on that. But how about Matthew Stafford? $32. He is the second highest paid quarterback in this game behind Kyler Murray, as you would expect. The numbers are there: 300 passing yards per game, 30 touchdowns. Yeah, it's throwing some pick sixes, but that's not necessarily going to kill you on on the daily fantasy end of it, even if it kills the Rams' chances of winning some of these games, as we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, if we were getting some kind of bonus, which other platforms might do, then maybe getting to 300 yards would be more than just a symbolic milestone. But ultimately, Matthew Stafford is going to be less salary because he doesn't have that rushing upside that we know Kyler Murray does. And honestly, if you are prioritizing high salary players and you're looking to play them at the superstar position, I'm honestly going elsewhere other than Stafford for most of my lineups. Not to say if I'm building a lot of lineups, I'll have 0 of him, but I do think I'm going to prioritize a player like Stafford outside of the superstar position and try to lean on getting the skill position player right, because I think it'll just pay off more when I am correct in tournaments, especially.
And there are a lot of position players to consider putting in that top spot. This is not one of those, hey, Lamar Jackson, just lock him in as your superstar and forget about it kind of games, or Josh Allen, lock him in and forget about it. Sometimes Kyler Murray is that guy that you lock in and forget about, but it's hard to do that when you have a DeAndre Hopkins on the other side of the field. He hasn't quite been DeAndre Hopkins this year. And then a Cooper Kupp, 136 targets. He's already got 100 catches, 11 touchdowns this year. It seems every game Cooper Kupp, makes a big play, has a big moment, has a big fantasy output. You're going to pay for him, though, $37. This is where I think it's fascinating tonight. Kupp is 37, Stafford is 32, and Kyler Murray is 37. You can get to all three, but boy, it's tough.
Yeah, and so you'll use our tools on Awesemo.com to help you narrow it down, but I'll give you a spoiler alert. A lot of time, going with a quarterback is beneficial from a floor standpoint, but I don't think Stafford is the best way to spend that salary. I think going with the massive ceilings of Kupp and Kyler are the way I'm leaning if I'm choosing two out of those three. So Cooper Kupp, he's just a different breed in terms of reliability at the wide receiver position. He's had 9 targets one time this year. The rest of the games that he's played, he's had 10 or more targets. There's a type of floor that Kupp has that no other receiver has, and it's not just opportunity. He's first in targets, red zone targets. That's led to being first in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns, which has led to being number 1 in fantasy points per game. He's just having a historically great year. He's going to soak up about 25% of the total targets here, and then the rest of the targets will be disseminated based on matchup. So I think he really is the safest option. I really like him at the superstar spot. I have more Cooper Kupp at superstar right now in my current crunch than I do either quarterback.
Wow. I tend to agree with you. And I'm a guy, usually what I do on Yahoo is lock in both quarterbacks that they're both going to be in my lineup, superstar spot, flex, whatever. You look at Yahoo this year, 48 single games that we have seen, 60% of the time, both quarterbacks are in the optimal. And there's only 5 spots in the optimal, so you're filling a lot. But, Cooper Kupp is really that kind of exception. And if you want to get to DeAndre Hopkins or some of these running backs, there's really no way to have both quarterbacks and get to Cooper Kupp. And Kupp just takes up so many targets for the LA offense.
Louis, bringing it back.
I know. The Chargers is one thing. You can't be saying St. Louis. Anyway, Kupp is just too big a factor until Odell Beckham Jr. has that game where you say, okay, if they're going to double Kupp, there's actually someone else there who could pick up that offense. There's just that he is the offense. He's going to get the majority of Stafford's points, pretty much.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And certainly when they get towards the red zone, they're still looking at Kupp. But you got to give credit to Van Jefferson. Since week 10, again, since Robert Woods went down, we've seen Van Jefferson really step up in opportunity. He's had a 20% target share, 5 red zone targets. That actually leads the team. It's more than Kupp. We thought Odell Beckham might be stepping into a huge role here, but the second-year receiver Van Jefferson might actually be a higher quality play at this point.
Yahoo thinks so. Van Jefferson's 18, Beckham's $16.
Yeah, I mean they're close too. Not to say Beckham hasn't been involved, the production hasn't been there. But I am pleasantly surprised to see him third on the target totem pole since week 10. 3 games played, 15% target share. There's certainly a jump between Beckham's 15% target share and Kupp's 27% target share. But in a 1-game slate, these are all viable pieces for sure.
How about Tyler Higbee? Minimum price at $10, which is tempting tonight because, like we said, you're paying up for at least 2 of those top 3, maybe all 3. You got to get Tyler Higbee into the end zone, 3 touchdowns, and now an extra red zone threat in Beckham, part of this offense.
Yep. Always guessing touchdowns is hard. Of course, that's true. But Tyler Higbee is on the field a whole lot, and that matters in a 1-game slate. 96% snap share since week 10. Only Cooper Kupp has hit that mark along with Tyler Higbee. So the target share, he's 4th in line, especially with Beckham there. But he can absolutely get in the end zone here. Arizona's defense is 17th in PFF's defensive grades. So we're looking at a league average defense. And they're fairly susceptible through the air. You could see a Tyler Higbee touchdown here. There's a reason he's a lower salary, but you're probably going to need a player like that to help you get to the studs up top.
So we're talking about 4 receivers predominantly in this Rams passing game. Anybody else that you mix in here? Is there a Jakeem Grant hiding on this bench?
Well, I don't know if there's anyone as shifty and speedy as Jakeem Grant, but there is. We could look at Ben Skowronek, played 23% of snaps, closer to, 23% of snaps over the last 3 weeks. And then really they're just mixing in different tight ends like Bryson Hopkins, Kendall Blanton. These are large field tournament options only. That's kind of it in the Los Angeles passing game.
Yeah, the Cardinals much deeper. We'll get into their passing game in a moment here as we tell you about our Awesemo Plus NFL Express weekly pass. It's just $3.95, $3.95. It's the best way to introduce yourself to the Awesemo Plus NFL and all the tools that are part of that. Player and ownership rankings, expert Slack chat, as well as the Discord, everything we have to offer for showdown and single game contests, including projections, ownership projections. New this year to the package is our season-long fantasy football coverage, which includes strength of schedule tool, trade value tool, fantasy streaming helper. Also included in new this year, projected ownership and optimal lineup probabilities for tiers contests on DraftKings. So check it out. Awesemo Plus NFL, our most expansive express weekly pass ever. $3.95. So go to the Awesemo Plus join page. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Arizona's passing game. We got to start with the quarterback, Kyler Murray. You got to pay up $37, but 266 yards per game. We know he can run a little bit. He's run for 5 touchdowns this year, thrown for 19. That's while missing 3 games over the course of this season. So kind of hard to get away from Kyler Murray tonight.
Yeah, he kind of proved immediately against the Bears all the ways that he can get there for fantasy football, rushing for a touchdown and throwing a 30-plus yard touchdown to DeAndre Hopkins. Ultimately finishes that game against the Bears last week with 123 yards passing. And you're like, wait a minute, that's a terrible game for Kyler Murray. No, he just didn't have to throw. He threw for 8 yards per attempt and scored twice with his legs, 4 total touchdowns, finishes as the QB1 overall in his first game back. Quintessential Kyler Murray. Obviously, this is a different matchup. The Los Angeles Rams, give them credit. They are back up to #1 in PFF's team defensive grade. So this isn't an easy matchup by any stretch, but we have evidence that this team, this Arizona team, can take on this Los Angeles defense and not only win, but crush them. So this is the safest option. We're going to talk about those other weapons in the skill players, but talk about safety and ceiling for the Arizona Cardinals. It starts and ends with Kyler Murray.
Yeah, Kyler Murray is going to be involved one way or the other. If they're behind, if they're ahead, he could run with the ball, he could throw the ball a little bit. And this is a good defense he's going against, but they can be beat, as we have seen quite a few times over these past few weeks. The weapons for Arizona, this is where it gets really tough. Whereas the Rams, it all goes through Cooper Kupp, or so it seems. Arizona, they really spread it around. And you look at someone like DeAndre Hopkins. Maybe he's ticketed to Canton one day. Hasn't been as productive this season. He's been banged up. You still got to pay up for him a bit, $28, 37 catches, 8 touchdowns this season. And then you have Zach Ertz, who's been a key part of this offense, has found the end zone 3 times. Christian Kirk, who leads the team in targets, $16. AJ Green, I've heard of him. He's pretty good. Rondale Moore is in this mix as well. It is crowded with Arizona. We've seen a number of guys step up with the various injuries that they've had this year.
Yeah. You got to give him credit too, because they have weathered injuries here, including to Kyler Murray, and they're still at the top of the NFC. So there is there's a chance that one of them suddenly starts to garner attention, and the probability of it being someone other than DeAndre Hopkins is incredibly low. We can say AJ Green might have been able to compete at some point in his career, but that's not the case right now. You said it though, they've had a ton of players over the course of the season have more than a 10% but less than a 20% target share, the definition of just spraying it around. Hopkins himself, in games that he's played this season, just 9, he's under 20%, a 19.6% target share. And as you mentioned, Christian Kirk, with his 17% target share and being healthier, has now outpaced DeAndre Hopkins in total targets. Ultimately, there's a reason why DeAndre Hopkins is the highest salary. He has the highest touchdown upside. But I think all of these players that we're going to get into here are really exciting. I think that Rondale Moore, with his yards after catch ability, could be really good. Even AJ Green, I know I disparaged him just a little bit, really just throwing the age model at him here, but he's had 56 targets compared to Kirk's 64 this season, and he's had 11 red zone targets, tied for the team lead. So I'm going to have some of them for sure. It's just really, really hard who on a week-to-week basis is going to hit.
Well, Hopkins, one advantage he has, 8 touchdowns in 9 games. As you mentioned, he has found the end zone quite a bit over the course of this year and over the course of his career. What about Rondale Moore? Let's get into him. And you're very good at having the snap counts and stuff from last week. So I believe this receiving core was fully intact last week, and DeAndre Hopkins played and everybody else. What did that do to Rondale Moore's snap count? I know the Awesemo projections are very high on Rondale Moore. And when you consider he's like the 4th, maybe even 5th option in this passing game, I guess everyone's trying to figure out exactly why that is and what kind of role Moore could be. Because at $14, he's great if you could fit him in, and he's got a high ceiling.
Well, you just mentioned it before. We're recording this the day after Jakeem Grant broke 2 touchdowns for the Chicago Bears against the Green Bay Packers, and we're looking for that type of play. And Rondale Moore fits that archetype perfectly to take one catch short near the line of scrimmage, break one tackle, and then turn that into a huge chunk play. And if you look at his underlying metrics, things like targets per snap or targets per route run, Rondale Moore actually looks like a highly utilized receiver. However, he doesn't play on a whole lot of the Cardinals snaps. With DeAndre Hopkins back in the lineup last week, Moore played on just 43% of snaps. That was 6th among all wide receivers and tight ends. And yet he ranks 13th in targets per route run, getting a target on 28% of the routes he's run this season. So obviously he's showing some ability to get open, and at a low salary, that looks really appealing. So I think that's the salary and the value that's really making him stick out in our tools.
You think someone like Moore would be game script dependent? Like maybe you're putting Sony Michel at the top and hoping the Rams are going to win this game, or even Stafford, whatever. And then you slide in Moore as, all right, Cardinals will be playing from behind. They're going to some 4 receiver sets, and they're getting more on the field. Is that kind of what we're looking at to expand his ceiling a little bit?
That is exactly what it is. And we've seen it be very game script dependent. And, in positive game scripts, he's hovering around 10, 12, 13 routes run. In negative game scripts, and they're coming back, he's running 22, 25, 26 routes. So he's almost doubling his workload. And we said his targets per route run has been pretty high. So hit the nail on the head here. If you're playing lineups that have the Rams hitting, it might be solid to have Rondale Moore as your run back, because he's going to get that extra work.
Yeah, and if you're throwing Cooper Kupp in there, you're going to have to save a little bit. You might not be able to get Kupp and Hopkins. So another receiver to look at for Arizona, and maybe someone that has a big second half. I suppose for props, keep an eye on that too, with those second half numbers, depending on what the score is as it heads to the break there. If you're not playing on Yahoo Fantasy, make sure you check it out. Do a deep dive into this, as we're doing a deep dive into Monday Night Football. You can check out our exclusive limited time offer at Awesemo, which gets you a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Now, to qualify, you need to be new to Yahoo. Sign up for an account via the link below, deposit, and play. Bada bing, bada boom. Yahoo will send us your name after you play in your first paid contest, and we'll reach out via email with your coupon if you need immediate access. Email support@awesemo.com. We'll get you all set up. And you can also claim a free $10 of site credit by clicking the link in the video description below, which will be used to enter any Yahoo contest, including tonight's $100,000 Monday NFL Baller. And make sure to use our DFS tools and projections designed specifically for Yahoo to give yourself the best chance at winning big. The running game really is fascinating tonight, and there's going to be more that we find out. We'll start with the Cardinals. James Conner, we talk about like what Colt McCoy did in those weeks when Kyler Murray was out. It was what James Conner did. You're paying up for him at $27, but even if Chase Edmonds does play tonight, Conner is clearly the goal line back, has found the end zone 12 times on the ground overall this season. I don't know if it's a decoy with Chase Edmonds. I think we'll find out at the top of the hour whether or not they're going to activate him from injured reserve. Edmonds is just $14. If Edmonds is inactive, Connor goes way up because he's going to see the lion's share of the carries. Obviously, if Edmonds is active, a little different story.
You almost want Edmonds to be activated and not play because it's going to push Connor's ownership down or rostership down here. But I do think that there's a strong possibility that Chase Edmonds is a week away here because it doesn't feel like we've seen any really positive, certainly not glowing reports about how good he's looking in practice. And I do feel like, well, maybe it's a Monday night game and it's been overshadowed by main slate talk, but I really haven't seen that across the social media sphere or the beat writers coming out of Arizona. Doesn't mean that that's absolutely the way it's going to go, but James Conner has been very, very productive for this team. So I have no problem getting to Conner, to be honest. Even if Chase Edmonds plays, I feel like Conner has kind of proven himself in this offense. And between the passing ability of Kyler Murray and the rushing ability of Kyler Murray taking away attention from the running backs, I think James Conner has a great chance to succeed here, especially because it's easier to rush on the Los Angeles Rams than it is to pass on them.
Now, if Edmonds is active, he's a guy that gets more involved, maybe game script dependent if they're behind. 37 targets as compared to 22 targets for James Conner. Obviously, less games as well with these games Edmonds has missed with the sprained ankle. But we'll find out more about that. But this is good. This is why we team up pretty well, because I give the obvious stuff, and then you take it to the second level and say, no, actually, it's good for Conner because then his ownership's going to drop, and you can fly up the leaderboards. You get some touchdowns from James Conner tonight, which we've seen plenty of times. The Rams running game, it's not really the number one thing they want to do, but it hasn't been a factor much because it's been Sony Michel and Darrell Henderson really splitting a lot of the load. Now Henderson is on the COVID list. It's just Sony Michel. He's $17. Hasn't exactly been dynamic this season, but Mekhi Sargent is his backup here. So if the Rams are ahead, you could see a lot of Sony Michel tonight.
Yeah. And I'm going to have a ton of Sony Michel because the salary is fundamentally wrong if you're just assuming that Sony Michel is going to get another 97% snap share like he did last week, because these prices came out when Darrell Henderson was expected or had a high probability of being back. I mean, he was activated but really didn't play in last week's game. So now Michel is basically as close to a free square that as you can get for a single game slate. I think you should lean into it. I think the touches are going to be there. I think in a high scoring game, especially in a single game slate, you want to lean on players with high volume, and running backs that play 97% of snaps get high volume. So I do think in terms of game script independence, you can't get really better than Sony Michel at that low salary. He's going to be super, super highly rostered, but for good reason here. If you can't get to him, it's fine. And fading him strategically in large field tournaments can make some sense, but he's the most obvious, safest play on the slate when you compare his projection to salary-based expectations.
No, it's kind of hard to find any kind of edge as you compare these teams. They're both very good. But Arizona, according to Football Outsiders, 15th in the league at defending the run. The Rams aren't the greatest run team in the world. They rank 10th offensively, but the Cardinals are very good against the pass. So maybe we see the Rams try to, I don't know about take advantage of a weakness, but take advantage of a mediocrity with one of the best teams in the NFL tonight. So that could be a way that Sony Michel gets involved a little bit more as well. Defenses here, I don't think we're thinking about defense a lot going into this game. Even last night, a touchdown for the Packers defense, a touchdown for the Bears defense. There were like 80 points to be fair, but neither defense made the optimal on Yahoo. Cardinals, you got to pay up a little bit, $19. Rams may be interesting at $12. It is a quality defense, though. Real tough opponent to be shutting down.
Yeah, you can always get there. Defensive touchdowns are really, really hard to predict. All touchdowns are hard to predict, but defensive touchdowns especially, and that's what you're really going to need. And like you said, that's not even a guarantee if the game script goes a certain way, like it's a shootout, which could absolutely happen here. One thing that is really strange about the Rams defense is there is some wild discrepancies depending on what metric you're looking at, because one of the fantasy related defensive metrics that I always quote, schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, the Rams are actually below average. They're one of the bottom 10 teams in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. I think that has to do with the production that many teams have either stomping them or in comeback mode. So ultimately, the fantasy production has been there in either scenario. That kind of makes me lean a little bit harder into the Cardinals players, regardless what I think about this outcome of the game. Maybe it's just a little bit safer here. But obviously, these strong options, especially in the Rams passing game and Sony Michel, I'll get to plenty of them as well.
Yeah, the Rams defense, they've played a ton of blowouts this year. So yeah, the fantasy points have probably been there as it's prevent mode, garbage mode late in so many of these games for them. So let's hit the superstar spot. I mean, tonight it's really fascinating. Looking at the Awesemo showdown tool, you have 4 players with a higher than 15% chance being the top scoring player. I saw James Conner's percentage was extremely low, but I feel like it deserved to be a little higher than what we had on there at 2%. I think you have a lot of options to go to here to try to hit at that superstar spot. That will likely decide a lot of these tournaments.
Yeah, it sure will. And it is a situation where I am spraying around with those high quality options. At the top of the superstar for me, it is Cooper Kupp. And then from there, I am going with Kyler Murray. I think they have unique ceilings in this spot. Really, what players other than Kupp and Murray can they get to 30 fantasy points in any sort of realistic game scenario? Only those two for me. And then I am going to have a lot of Sony Michel. I'm probably going to be over the field on James Conner, probably leaning into the possibility of he being a workhorse, even with Chase Edmonds active, and hoping that they do activate him and lower the rostership there.
There you go. And I just want to go back to Darrell Henderson. I've been talking as if he's guaranteed to be out here. And a couple of people in the chat have been asking this question. Now, Henderson was placed on the COVID-19 list on Saturday. He would have to test negative twice within 24 hours of game time to be eligible to play. It's typically pretty tough to do. So I think as of now, the assumption is that Darrell Henderson will not play. I suppose it's possible that changes before game time. Mm-hmm. You'll have plenty of time to adjust if that's the case. But obviously, that would deal a big blow. That's a little different than the Chase Edmonds situation, right? As far as James Conner goes, where all of a sudden Sony Michel isn't looking like such a hot choice if Darrell Henderson does somehow manage to play tonight.
Yeah, and CBS Sports reported right when it happened that he wouldn't have enough time. So I'm willing to trust that source and say that he is out for tonight, and it's going to be Sony Michel's backfield.
All right, so for the Rams, Cooper Kupp, you got some star power in this game. You got 2 quarterbacks more than capable of airing it out. 2 really good defenses as well. I mean, this is a really fun matchup. If you had to guess, what's going to determine it, I talked about the superstar spot being it. It doesn't feel like a game where we're going to get shocked. I don't know. Is this the ultimate jinx? We're going to get shocked by Jakeem Grant or someone kind of coming out of nowhere. I feel like we kind of know how these offenses get their points.
Yeah, I do. We didn't mention Zach Ertz, and that's one of them that could kill me the way that I've crunched my lineups. If Zach Ertz gets in the end zone, he's already had a 40-plus yard score. That's not something I expected to see from Zach Ertz in 2021. But
doesn't he have a running score too? Did they put him at running back once?
Yeah, I believe you're right. I mean,
remember.
Hey, look, you're gonna trade for a player like that. You better use it on your way to a hopeful Super Bowl run. We said this before we went live today. I'm kind of hoping that Arizona takes this one because we need a legitimate contender against Tom Brady in the NFC. Mm-hmm. I know the Packers say they are, but Rodgers is beat up. I think the Cardinals actually have the best chance here. Should be a great game tonight.
No rushing touchdowns for Zach Ertz, but he does have 1 carry for 4 yards. Maybe I'm misremembering exactly where on the field it occurred there. But yeah, let's hope somebody can topple the new evil empire, these 2 evil empires now that exist in Tampa Bay and New England, and put that talk to bed for a week. But we appreciate y'all watching the Yahoo NFL Live Show. There's a ton of content still to come here on the Awesemo DFS channel. We'll be doing the NBA Deeper Dive pre-show at 4:30 Eastern, so you get your basketball fix there. And then Matt will be back for Live Before Lock, looking at this NFL Showdown Monday night matchup between the Cardinals and the Rams. That starts up at 7:15 Eastern. Mr. Savoca, Draftaholic, give him a follow. I'm Pete McCarthy. Have a good one, guys.